Take 2 or 4 now. I can actually get through these pretty fast.
So bad.
It's taking me forever. I haven't seen the CPI go that quickly.
We're good. Okay. We will recall, I feel like this is we will recall the order and start with a roll call in open session, please.
Here.
Present.
Here.
Present.
Present.
Just a reminder to use the microphone in front of you so that people can hear at home. All right. We will start with public participation. Members of the public, sorry, I lost my place. Thanks. Members of the public who wish to speak to the board should complete a request card prior to the start of the meeting. This section of the meeting will be reserved for comments from the public. All comments should be limited to 3 minutes. Criticism of individuals is not in order. Do we have public comment tonight? No. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I see now. Thank you. Next, we have board correspondence. And while we're in this section, I did want to let you know that the 2022 Resolutions Committee report came to me in the mail. There is an electronic version or a digital version that I will have Jackie send to each of you, and we need to be ready to discuss them at our next meeting so that when we send our delegate, which I believe is Board Member Sarah Moses, to the delegate committee at the Triple I conference, she'll have our decisions ready. So I'll send that to you digitally. Please be ready to discuss at our next meeting. Since our last meeting, we have had a FFAC meeting. It went well. We're still looking at what we can do to serve students in a better way and reducing class size, and that is a focus of FFAC right now. Anyone else? No? Okay. Then we have student board member correspondence, and this is a new part of our agenda that we've added to make sure we're making space for Chance Kalin, our student board member. Do you have anything to share, Chance?
Oh, yeah, I was just...
Oh.
So we do have the student advisory committee starting up soon. We've already looked at different applicants already today, and next week interviews should start. We had a little bit of a delay, but for the most part, they should be starting up soon. And student youth speak out should be maybe somewhere in December for the most part. And yeah, I think that's for everything.
Any questions for Chance? Thank you, Chance.
Thank you.
Next in presentations is our tax levy presentation, and this is informational presented by Cindy Carpenter.
Kayla said I had 3 minutes. I don't know where to stand. I'll just go over here, I suppose. Do I need to talk into the microphone? Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me?
Can you just, it's really for the streaming,
Oh,
so
okay.
you can still talk loudly for the room, though.
Okay, sorry. Okay. So it's that time of the year where we start talking about the tax levy. And what I usually do is I start with an information presentation to the board to kind of remind them about the process and what we go through every year to go through that tax levy process. So where I'd like to start here is our sources of revenue, just to give you a perspective of where all our money is coming from, our revenues. And you can see property taxes. Let's see, do I have? Does this work? No, it doesn't really show on there. Property taxes are about 41% of our revenues, so a pretty big chunk of revenues. The other largest chunk of revenues that we have are from the state. Our state evidence-based funding is about 30% of our revenue. Then we have other state sources, which is transportation reimbursement or special education reimbursement as well, which is about 9%. Federal sources are about 14%. That's a larger number than typical because of the emergency relief funds that we have been receiving the last couple of years. And so it just is kind of nice to see exactly where our funds are coming from. So I like to give this to give the board perspective in terms of where those revenues are coming from. So the tax levy process, and this is for this levy year, is 2022. So the levy year isn't done yet. The equalized assessed values aren't completed yet, but we have some estimates at this point. Right now, when we go through this tax levy process, we are really looking at kind of guessing to some extent, making educated guesses in terms of what that tax levy might look like. So right now, we're getting estimates from the DeKalb County assessor, and I've already gotten a couple of them, and I really, probably every couple of weeks, I contact them again, do we have another update, do we have another update? Because we like to have the most recent updates when we're actually doing the tax levy request, which is actually will be at the next board meeting, November 15th. And it's a pretty prescribed process that we have to go through. So we have to approve the tax levy request at least 20 days before the final tax levy adoption. So we do it at the November 15th meeting. Then we also have to post a truth in taxation notice, which is a public document that we put in the paper that announces the public hearing for the tax levy. And then at the December 13th meeting, which we have plenty of time between those meetings, we meet that 20-day mark to do the tax levy adoption, where we hold a public hearing, and then we adopt the final tax levy request, and then we file a certificate of tax levy, and that is has to be done by the last Tuesday in December. So for this year, that's December 29th of 2020. That should be 2022. Sorry about that. And then tax rates are established in March and April because that's when everything is finalized. All the equalized assessed values are processed, and then that's when we actually get our final tax levy rate. And then taxes get collected between May of 23 and November of 23. Those tax bills are due usually in June and September when they get sent out by the county. And then we start receiving those dollars through that period of time. And then all that revenue that's received for the 2022 tax levy gets posted as revenue in our 23-24 budget year. So we're always a year ahead of it. Anything that we receive in May and June of this year, which is technically still fiscal year 23, we always record that revenue into the next budget year. So this is basically the law, the property tax extension limitation law. A lot of people call it the tax cap. It really isn't capping taxes, it's just limiting how much you can ask for. So that's why they call it the extension limitation law. So it was enacted in DeKalb County back in 1999, and it regulates and limits the growth of property taxes within that county. Now there's plenty of counties in Illinois, and not all counties fall under this law. Some counties, it was a referendum that each county had started happening back in the late 90s. So some counties passed it and some didn't. And an example of one that is not under this PTEL is Ogle County to the west, and LaSalle County to the south. So they just have a little more flexibility in their tax levy because they don't fall under this particular law. Now, school district's tax levy changes each year based on 3 variables. We have the consumer price index. We have the new property growth, which includes recovered TIF, which is tax increment finance district properties. And I'll get more into that later in the presentation. And then you also have the ability to grab that growth outside of the PTEL in the first year. So any of that growth, we can get access to it. And this new property is new construction, new companies that come into DeKalb County, those types of things. And then any change in the district's annual debt schedule. So we have debt to pay off bonds when we built the high school in Cortland Elementary and did some renovations. So those are scheduled debt payments that we have to make, and that's also part of the tax levy. So the tax extension, you can only increase by the consumer price index, the CPI. And I have it in red here because for the 2022 tax levy year, which is basically the 2021 consumer price index, was 7%. Now the law only limits us to go to 5%. So it's either 5% or whatever is less. 7% is a really high inflation number. We all know that. A consumer price index really is basically a measurement of inflation. So that's quite a large number compared to what we've seen in the past, and I have a slide related to that too. And then you can also increase your levy by any new property that's added to the tax roll, so any new construction or new properties that come into our school district boundaries. So here's a chart of our consumer price index and where it has been over the last, well, since basically 2005 calendar year. So you can see at the bottom here, the kind of the schedule of when we get the consumer price index. So for example, at the very end here where we see that 7%, that was for calendar year 2021, which affects the 2022 tax levy year, which is the levy year that we're in now, which for us affects our 23-24 budget. So you can kind of see the timeline in terms of how it gets incorporated into our budgets. So here you can see it's been pretty much a seesaw for a while. I mean, it was back in 07, 08, which was the 2005 calendar year, 3.4%. Now we're at 7%. And it's really vacillated quite up and down, almost back in 2010, 2011, where we were almost at zero. It was like 0.1% back at that time. So when you look at our averages, the 17-year average is about 2.28%, and the 5-year average about 2.94%. You can see back in the 18-19 budget year or 19-20, things were fairly flat for a while. It was pretty consistent. Then we saw this big bump in inflation for the 2022 tax levy year, which is the 21 calendar year. And again, we're only limited to the 5%. We can't ask for more than 5%. So now this is a chart of our equalized assessed value and our tax rate history. And what equalized assessed value is the assessed value of the properties that are within our school district. This isn't market value, this is assessed value, meaning if every property owner gets something from the county that says, okay, this is what we're assessing your property at, and that's how the taxes get calculated. Usually, give or take, the market value is usually about 3 times the assessment. That's kind of an average, but it just depending on a specific property, but that's kind of the rule of thumb that gets used. So you can see we've had some, back in 2009, we had somewhat peaked in our EAV in terms of the value of about $843 million. And now in 2021, we're about $902 million. But you can see that's when the recession started, the Great Recession back in 2008, 2009. We somewhat peaked, and then you can see it just started to decrease after that. And the result of that, where you can see these lines, is that our tax rate increased. Because that's really the relationship between the equalized assessed value and then the tax rate. So when those equalized assessed values went down, not as much value in the properties, so the tax rate goes up because we need to garner those dollars. So you can see there's 3 different lines. One is the limiting tax rate, which is what they call it is the operating rate. So that's that red line. Then we have the bond and interest rate, which is that is the rate that's used for debt service that we get from the taxpayers to pay our debt. And then that total rate is that top line. So you can see it was going up, and now it's more flattening a little bit and then going down as well, because the equalized assessed values of properties in our district have increased over the last number of years. So I want to kind of give you an idea of what type of properties that we do have in our tax base. So for the 2021 year, which these are actual numbers, these were based on last year, our rate setting EAV is $902 million. And the properties that we actually have a pretty good pie chart in terms of the diversity of properties that we do have. We've got commercial properties, industrial, mineral is the wind turbines that we have to the south of us. State railroad, which we know we have a railroad here, and we've got some properties that are assessed by the state. We have farm property, and then we have residential property. So we have a fairly good mix of properties within our within our boundaries. And then also we cover various different townships for our school district. The bulk of it is in DeKalb Township, about 82%, but we also have Cortland, we also have Malta out to the west, and then some various townships that are more rural in nature. So it just gives you an idea of where the bulk of the properties are in what townships. Now, also this is based on 2021 data, is a breakdown of our TIF areas, or tax increment finance districts. If you remember last year when we did the tax levy, there was about $60 million that was in the central area TIF that TIF expired, and now values of those properties are now on our tax rolls, we call it. They're part of our rate-setting EAV. Prior to that, it was on the city's tax rolls. So that TIF expired, so we got about 60 million in, we call that new property, because when that happens, it is considered new growth that we add to our tax rolls. So that expired 1 year sooner, so we had access to that equalized assessed value back for the 2021 tax year. And then also, if you remember, back in 2019, there was TIF 2, a smaller TIF that was in the city of DeKalb. That expired back in 2019, so about 14.5 million came back to the tax rolls. And the only TIF that's left now in DeKalb is TIF 3, which was created back in 2019. It was a carve-out of the big TIF. And what was left there is pretty much just the downtown area is TIFed at this point. So as of the 2021 tax year, about a little less than 5 million, 4.5 million is TIF 3. That's the equalized assessed value in that particular TIF. Then we have a TIF that's also in Cortland, about 3 million, and then a TIF that's in Malta for about 4 million. And then I also just did a quick breakdown of what is in those TIFs in terms of residential, commercial, industrial, and farm. So you can kind of get an idea of what that looks like. But I think this is significant because a lot of new growth happened last year because of that TIF coming off. I know this looks very mathy, and so I'll just go through some of the highlights here. But I think it's, if you have time, want to go through it and actually do the calculations yourself, you can do that. But these are kind of the various different parts of the tax levy calculation of what happens and how the years are connected. Because you're always looking at the prior year, so we start with the 2020 equalized assessed value, what that was. And like I said, it's about a third of the market value. And then in 2021, the change in existing equalized assessed value, so that's the value of the property prior to any new growth, was about 0.64%. So not a huge change in existing property EAV for the 2021 tax levy year. You take that equalized assessed value, you times it by that growth, and then you come up with a new rate-setting EAV, equalized assessed value without the new growth. In 2021, we had a lot of new growth, and most of that is the commercial growth that's happening over by 88, which was a big chunk of this was for our candy. So that was the new growth there, and that's probably the biggest new growth number that we've seen in quite some time. Usually it was about 2 or 3 million a year, so that was a pretty big number. And then also in 21, we had like I mentioned, the city of DeKalb recovered TIF for about 60 million. So if you add all those up, the new growth and the TIF recovered and the existing new EAV number, that's where we came up with the 2021 actual rate setting EAV, the 902 million. So that's how we get to that number. Then when you're calculating the tax levy, you look at the 2020 operating levy extension from the county, so what they extended to us in the previous year, which was about 53.2 million. And at that time, for 2021, the consumer price index that we used was 1.4%. So we basically just times those two together to get how much new property taxes are coming from inflation, so about 744,000. Then we look at the new growth, and so when you add those, the new growth plus the extension amount before new growth is about 53.9 million. And then you come up with an operating tax levy for 2021. So that was what our operating tax rate was for 2021. And when you're breaking out that operating tax rate, you can see how much is coming from the new growth. So we had the 744 that is coming from the extension of EAV for the existing properties. We had about almost 2 million from the new growth, for our candy and other new growth, and about 4 million that came from that recovered TIF. So that's how we come up with the total operating extension for last year's levy of about just shy of $60 million, about 59.9 million. And on top is really just repeating what I had on the bottom there, but then also folded into the tax levy is our annual debt service levy. So for 22-23, which is this fiscal year, that's how much we have to pay in this year to pay our debt, was about 6.9 million. We had a bond and interest abatement last year from the property tax relief grant that we used to reduce that 6.9 million to the about 1.2 million. So our bond and interest rate was about 0.12, about 0.13%. And then the operating, so when you get to the bottom line and the total levy, you have your operating extension plus your debt service. And then also there is a new law, a recapture levy that basically started in the 2021 tax year that allowed taxing bodies to get monies back from appeals and when people were appealing their property taxes or they weren't paying them. So this was a recapture levy got added onto that, so about $314,000. So our total extension was $61,419,177. So that was what was extended to the district for the tax levy. And what I do here is I just compare the actual extension from the prior year, 2020 to 21. So you can see our operating levy had a pretty decent increase of about 13%, a little less than that, mostly because of that new growth. And then the bond and interest was less because we were able to use that property tax relief grant to bring that number down. So our total levy was about 7.76% increase when you include the operating levy and the bond and interest levy. So just a quick comparison. This I just like to show because just give you a history of what we request, what we get extended, and what we actually receive, because there are three different numbers. So when we request the levy, we're always requesting more than we're probably going to get. I mean, we're limited to what we can get with the calculation, but we request more because we want to make sure we're capturing all the new property or any changes in EAV, but from the estimate to when it actually gets extended in March and April. Then we have what it gets extended by the county. So let's say for 2021, the levy request was about $62,856,000. What actually got extended by the county was $61,419,000. And then what we're actually receiving, really real dollars, is about $60,863,000. And right now that's still an estimate because we're still waiting for our last collection, which usually happens in November-ish. They have to wait till they finalize all the books and all. So we're still waiting for that particular number, but that's a pretty close estimate. And so there's a difference between what we actually ask for and then what we actually receive as well. So I like to just show that because also we had a 3M, which is an old tax abatement that is finally off the books now, but there's, when we get our taxes, we have to pay that back to the county because 3M had an abatement, but that should be done by now. So taxpayer saving strategies, and again, I think you've seen this slide before. I show it a number of times, but just some of the things that we have done over the years to try and keep that tax rate under control as well as the dollars that the taxpayers pay. We abate or reduce our bond and interest tax levy, which basically means the taxpayer doesn't pay that portion of the debt for that particular levy year. We did that in 2018 with operating funds, about $1,750,000. We also did that in 2019 when we qualified for the property tax relief grant, and in 2020, 21, and 22. So we've been fortunate to be able to have those funds in order to reduce that burden. And on top of that, starting back in 2016 and ending in 2020, we did a multi-year bond restructuring process where we looked at how much we owed and paid down some principal with some TIF funds, about $3 million, $10 million from reserves that we had in working cash to bring down principal and then refinance that debt just like you would refinance your mortgage debt to bring that debt down when interest rates were very favorable. We got some very good interest rates. And then also a couple years back in 2020, the board chose not to take advantage of the consumer price index increase at 2.3%, which reduced the levy for 2020 as well as in the futures, because when you do that, the future levies are affected as well. So that's a permanent cumulative savings to the taxpayer, but also reduction in our revenue as well. But that was done knowing that that would be the case. So for 2022, some considerations we need to think about as we walk through this process the next couple of board meetings. We're working with the DeKalb County Assessor to get our estimated equalized assessed value and new growth numbers. Preliminarily, as of October 19th, they're looking at a rate setting equalized assessed value of about $987 million, which is about a 9.5% increase from the 2021 year. And then new growth of about $14 million, which includes the partial Facebook Meta new construction that's happening to the south. There's also a new public act that was just enacted. It was actually back in the May legislative session that allows for the recapture of previous levies if a district decides to under-levy, similar to what we did when we under-levied, that's what you call it, for that 2.3% in 2020. There's a 3-year look-back period, and you have to under-levy during one of those periods if you wanted to do this. So it gives that flexibility. If you do under-levy and want to basically recapture, you can do that if the board wants to do that. And, but you're not allowed to recapture more than the CPI. So if the CPI is always 5%, then you really can't recapture if you had that happen before. And we can't go back to 2020 and recapture. It's only if we do this in the future, if that's something that's decided to do. And then the property tax relief grant, we're in the second year of the required abatement cycle, like I mentioned, so we'll have to abate about 5.7 million. And I had actually updated this to, looks like we may qualify for the 23 property tax abatement cycle as well. So I'm kind of talking to the state just to see what that process would look like, if we have to basically abate for this cycle and then also abate in 22 for the cycle that's coming up. So I'll have more information at the next meeting after I run through some numbers and then talk with them exactly what that process looks like. And that is it for now. Yes.
Do you ever look at, I was curious if you look at the total dollars that come from residential versus commercial?
Oh, in terms of the amount,
Right.
yeah.
Just I was curious, I think that might be of interest to taxpayers.
Yeah.
To know, because I think as these commercial enterprises continue to, I think every year, in fact, on a couple of these agreements, I know we have an accelerator in them.
Yeah.
Over the next 20 years or whatever. I think it would be good to see if you could throw that in.
Yeah, I
there.
could easily do that because I have the breakdown, like I had this one slide here. Let's see.
Well, actually, that's the one I was referring to, because
Yeah.
I was looking for.
Yeah, because this
a
is the
comparative.
EAV, but I can just basically apply the tax rate to each of these EAVs, and then you can calculate the dollars related to each of the different categories. Yeah.
Absolutely. 'Cause
Yes.
I think people will be like happy to see actually what impact that's having.
No, I think that's a great idea, yeah. And I just wanted to mention that Amir Doka is here, so, and if you can make a note of that, Amir, we can work on that. And he started this week, so you'll see his familiar face here a lot, so, welcome, Amir.
Welcome back, Amanda.
Happy back.
Mm-hmm, I'm happy too. Any other questions? I thought you had 14 of them.
I was joking.
Okay, thank you. I was prepared.
So this is, at our, when will you actually bring what you're.
At the next board meeting.
At the next board meeting
Mhm.
is when we'll look at what our actual levy request
Yes.
will be.
And
Okay.
I will give you options as well, because we'll have a few options, yes. Because this is I'll be honest, this is a tough year for all districts, tough in terms of because of that inflation number. That's a big inflation number that, actually, there's a lot of districts that haven't. What we do every year is we always have a truth in taxation hearing, regardless of whether we get to that 5% or not, just because I think it's just more transparent and just easier to go
good
through that.
practice.
Yes, exactly, and past practice, so there's a lot of districts that have never gone through that process because they've never asked for more than that. But, so it's definitely, we went to a workshop on it, and there's a lot of districts that are really struggling with, what's the best thing to do. So we'll give a couple of options, probably more than a couple. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Mhm.
I think it also speaks well that we had last year didn't actually take the CPI, right? I
Well,
think-
that was back in 2020.
Was it 2 years ago?
That was
Sorry.
2 years
2
ago.
years ago.
Yeah,
My old
back in
brain.
20. Yeah, we did last year. The CPI was 1.4%.
That's right.
Yeah, and we had that TIF coming on, we had the new growth, and we just wanted to make sure we did capture that new growth. Because if you don't capture that new growth in that first year, then you're losing that for the future as well,
Right.
so, yeah, so we had to be careful.
That leads to my question. So what all is our new growth? It's Ferrara was.
For last year, it was mostly Ferrara. I
Right.
mean, we had some other smaller new growth,
So
but.
we don't have a lot, there's not.
There's 13, they're projecting 13 million this year, so it's
But
not
I'm
as
sorry,
much.
I guess where is that coming from then? Or just that's
Oh,
just increased
Facebook.
property? Okay,
A big,
Facebook.
a
Okay.
big piece of that is Facebook, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And
But
they're
then-
just about halfway with their first part?
Yes,
I
yes,
think.
it was just a piece of that, yeah, it's not the total amount. So we're gonna see
potentially
about,
next year.
probably for the, well, that's 2022, for like 23 and 24 and 25, we're gonna see chunks of that coming through over the next few years as they're building that out.
So that's like an incremental capture we would have to make. each
Exactly,
time.
each time, yes, each time it gets assessed in the
Do we have an
assessment.
idea of what the total amount would be, or like?
I think after it's all said and done, let's see, 20, probably about 40 million-ish, I think, but it's gonna take like 3 or 4 years or even 5 years to get there.
So this is like about a quarter of what?
That's probably about right, yeah, about
Uh-huh.
25% of it.
Is, that's, with the abatement? No, they don't have an abatement.
Well, they do, yes.
They do.
It's Amazon that doesn't have an abatement, yes. No, and what happens is, the abatement is on the EAV. So what they do is they take the EAV and they subtract that out. So it's not necessarily, 3M abatement was they would calculate everything, and then the abatement, they would do an extension and then take it off the extension. This is on the EAV itself. It just almost acts like a TIF to some extent, or it gets pushed aside. Yeah, and we don't get access to it for the 15 or 20 years that that abatement is there. Yeah, so it's a little different because it's an enterprise zone abatement. Okay, okay, great.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Cindy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
But I'm
you.
sorry, I do, but what,
Sure.
what was the TIF amount that we wanted to capture the last time it came on? How much was it?
60 million, 60.3 million.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this year it would be the 13, which would be more like.
Well, the 13, so it's, the TIF was the 60 million, the new growth here was the 29 million. That's the Ferrara.
Okay, so it was both of those together?
It was both of those
Okay.
together,
So,
yeah.
right, but this year we're looking at
Just the new
13
growth.
million
Yes,
in new growth.
right. So
capture.
there's no TIF
So
recapture.
significantly less this year.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But yet, last year was a very unusual year. I mean, it
Yeah.
was, we had.
Well, right, we had so many new.
We had the growth and the TIF coming off at the same time. So that was definitely very unusual.
And we have all that inflation though, too, this year to consider.
Yes, yes. Mhm.
Cindy, when you come back to present next time, could you possibly have those comparatives in there
Comparatives of,
that we just talked about?
oh, yeah, yeah, sure.
I just think it'd be easier for people to wrap their head around those
Mhm.
type of questions if they were seeing it graphically.
Yep, no.
That like
Well,
the
it helps the
increase
lo-
that we're asking for isn't all residential. It
Right.
doesn't come from necessarily.
Yes, no,
residential.
no,
I understand.
absolutely, yeah. I'll do the same thing, but I'll just put the dollar number, the dollars with it, the actual tax dollars with it, so,
Perfect.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Yep.
Okay. Next is our consent agenda. And it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda items A through D as attached. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please. Yes.
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 Okay. Moving to old business, we have the NABE conference, and this is an action item that was presented by Sarah Montgomery and AJ Crook. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the multilingual programs coordinator, secondary multilingual leader, and 2 middle school building administrators to attend NABE conference in Portland, Oregon, February 22nd to the 25th, 2023. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Subject B, staffing request, addition of 2.0 FTE speech language pathologists, and this is an action item that was presented by Kyle Gertis and Deetra Salas. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the increase of speech and language pathologists by 2 FTE from 15 FTE to 17 FTE to support the increase of students requiring evaluation and services and for compliance with the requirements and guidelines of the Illinois Administrative Code. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Subject C is the Technology Department realignment. It is recommended, or this was presented by Ben Bale, and it is an action item. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the Technology Department realignment. Is there a motion?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What was the total cost of the realignment, the increase?
It was, yeah, I was gonna say 48, but
I thought it was 54.
it's on,
Can't believe it, man. It's money.
that wasn't it. Hold on, I know it's in the old.
in the spirit of keeping us competitive with Facebook and Amazon?
Facebook, Amazon, as well as districts.
Other
east of
districts?
us,
Mhm.
We're comparable to be competitive to districts within the same segment, and which are geographically close enough where we're going to use that.
Thank you.
Is there, let me just read the, sorry. I'll read the action again. Unless, are there other questions?
So moved.
Oh, I'm going to read it again so everyone
Oh,
knows what we're
sorry.
voting on. It's okay. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the Technology Department realignment.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Okay, new business administration. Subject A is request to bid summer projects. This is informational, and Miss Tammy Carson.
Good evening. We are at that time of year again that we're ready to go out to bid for summer projects. You may remember I already had brought forth to the board request to bid for HVAC projects for next summer. That was going to be contingent on ESSER funding being available because we were still in the process of finalizing some numbers with the ESSER grants. After further discussion, we have opted to delay bidding on those HVAC projects for summer '23, and we'll reconsider again for next year. So those have been tabled at this point, but the projects that we're looking to bring forth to bid are listed in the rec in front of you. We're looking at seal coating at the next round of schools. We have a 3-year rotation when seal coating, so every 3 years each of our parking lots are seal coated. The buildings listed there are on the schedule for this coming summer. We have a larger project than normal on our list for concrete and asphalt repairs that we'd like to see where the price would come in for bids. We have a lot of concrete around the district, sidewalks, curbs and such, that are safety hazards and are getting to the point if we don't get them replaced or repaired, we will end up putting more money into that. So we have assessed it and come up with our priority 1 items from the concrete, and those are requested to go to bid at the schools that are listed. And then we actually have 2 parking lots that need to be completely replaced in the district. One is at Malta and one is at the Education Center. And we're recommending moving forward with the Malta parking lot for '23 and then looking for in the future to do the Education Center as funding becomes available. The other projects are a couple of flooring projects. The pod at Little John, which has several classrooms attached to it, that carpeting needs to be replaced with some new flooring, as well as the Media Center at Malta. With those, I will say the majority of our flooring projects we're getting to the point that I feel we're pretty caught up in the district, across the district. So I'm excited to knock these couple of projects off, and then we'll just deal with the others as needed. And then the 2 biggest projects that I have on the list for next summer are the restroom projects. We have renovations that are seriously needed at Huntley Middle School. The main restrooms at Huntley Middle School that are just off of the cafeteria, 1st and 2nd floor, need to be completely renovated. We have repairs that need to be done in the ceilings, in the walls that are just areas we can't get to anymore. They're actually original to the building, so we've known this was coming and we finally have to get this taken care of. And then we have some other restrooms at Little John that we have some drainage issues going on that we've been fighting against, and we are recommending replacing 2 sets of main bathrooms and then 5 small restrooms that are in classrooms or right off the hallway as part of that. So that is the operations and maintenance budget is what we'd be looking to use for that would be funding out of this fiscal year and then obviously into next fiscal since we cross over as of July 1st in the summer, it crosses into the next budget year. And then the second, oops, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jeremy.
The restroom renovations at Huntley,
Yes.
is that the old ELDC ones, or is it somewhere else? And then how many bathrooms is it exactly?
These are the ones, it's when you come straight out of the cafeteria, there's a set right there, it's not ELDC. They're the ones that would be straight down from the office as you're heading towards the cafeteria, 1st floor and 2nd floor. So they're the large bathrooms in the building, largest bathrooms in the building that serve the majority of the students. And so it's two girls' bathrooms and 2 boys' bathrooms.
So 4 total.
4 total, yes.
Thank you.
And then the other project listed are our life safety projects. We are getting close to having all of our roofs replaced in the district, which I know for all of you doesn't sound real exciting, but it is very exciting for me because when I started 14 years ago, we were way behind on roof replacement projects, and roofs are not very cheap to replace. So getting to this point, we're looking to replace the Malta roof, and that's the entire roof. Once we have that roof replaced, all we will have left in the district to catch up for life expectancy on roofs will be Brooks Elementary, and then a small roof remaining on the Huntley Middle School, which is above the ELDC section. So again, very exciting. If we can get this approved and use the life safety money towards the roof replacement, that would again come out of that budget.
What happened with that sort of review?
Well, actually, I'll let Cindy maybe speak on the ESSER project and those funds.
Yeah, I've been working with the grant manager, Mike Civilian. We've been meeting quite frequently and going line by line in our ESSER 2. Well, ESSER 2 pretty much was used up with these summer projects that we just completed. And then there's a little leftover that we need to push into ESSER 3 to pay for some of that, about $1 million more. And then as we're looking line by line, there's not as much room in the ESSER 3 to support any significant high back. There might be a little bit of dollars left, but right now, we're being pretty conservative in terms of what we have already budgeted in there for various different items and instructional needs. So that's why we're kind of putting the brakes a little bit until we can kind of see where this year goes in terms of those dollars. So we're taking a really good close look at those dollars to make sure we have the available funds.
And also note, with the HVAC items that I brought forth, those were not an immediate need, pressing emergency type of projects. They were projects that are on the list and we would like to get accomplished in the next few years, but it wasn't something that we had to have done in '23. But if ESSER funding would have been available, we would have moved forward with it. We still have the opportunity, if funding is available, to use those ESSER funds into 2024. So we'll look at that after we get to, and when we get to that point this year or next year.
Any other questions? Consensus to bring this back for action?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you,
Thank you.
Tammy. Subject B, DCTA PAVE LOA. And this is informational presented by Deetra and Kyle.
Good evening. So we're bringing forward an LOA with administration and DCTA regarding practical and vocational education. This is a special ed class that's taught at the high school, and what this LOA will do will identify staff members that will take coursework to make themselves certified to teach the PAVE course, and then the district would pay those individuals back for the coursework that they've completed. We don't have a number of staff that are currently certified to do this, so this is us building a pipeline and creating staff so that we will have individuals to facilitate those classes.
Any questions? Consensus to bring this back for action?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Subject C, DFSA Rise Interventionist MOU, and this is also informational, and it is brought to us by Deetra and Billy.
So administration has worked with DFSA. There was a grievance file regarding the RISE interventionist that supported the RISE intervention program, and we've worked together to determine qualifications and staffing for that program. So in this agreement, they will drop the grievance, and we can move forward with the requesting of positions and hiring so that we can get that program fully up and running in the district. Any questions I can answer?
Are there any questions?
So there will be part-time positions that become available that will be posted.
Yes, and that is in there.
So there'll be part-time positions for people in the community that would like to come work
Yep, and that is actually in the DFSA contract. It's not a normal practice that we employ part-time assistants based on our needs for our students, but in this intervention role, we would explore doing part-time positions.
And we would be definitely looking for retired teachers and any other,
Looking for any and everyone
Yes.
that has a PEL and/or paraprofessional license through ISB,
Or that would be willing to get a paraprofessional.
or willing to get one, absolutely.
License. Because we know that this is an intervention that we'd like to run more fully, would anybody entertain moving this to action tonight so that we can get these positions posted? I am moving that we move this to action. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, so now we are acting on, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the DFSA RISE Interventionist MOU. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Got that, Jackie? Roll call, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
And then subject D, staffing request, PE, from a .6 to a .7 allocation increase at Malta. And this is informational and brought to us by Deetra and Billy.
So good evening again. So we're coming to you asking for a .6 to .7 increase, so a .1 increase. Reason being, our part-time PE teacher that we were gonna hire, she's actually had to take on an extra section because of the amount of intensive students that we have at Malta, creating an extra section. So we'd either have to pay an overload or pay this person to help us alleviate that overload. So that's what we're coming to all of you tonight for.
Are there any questions? Consensus to bring this back for action?
Yes.
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 Thank you. Subject E, staffing request, FADASP 1.0, Office Professional 1 for DHS, Truancy and Discipline, and this is brought to us by Deetra, Amana Quinette, and Donna. Good evening.
So this request is to increase the 10-month office professionals by 1.0 to meet the need as related to both discipline and truancy. And Donna can speak to that.
So just this year, with increase of our plans to move forward to help with the truancy, attendance, as well as help with more restorative of our discipline, we have had a strong need to help support our current office staff. We're staying later, trying to help develop more, or process the coding, the data, and just making sure that everything is lined up. So what we were talking about was just increasing to help with that piece, especially with the enrollment numbers that, did increase. We only have one attendance secretary currently, as well as one discipline secretary already. One of them had COVID earlier on in the year, that was super difficult for us to try to fill that position or try to help with that. So this person will also be able to help when somebody is out, as well as our numbers that have grown. Do you have anything to add?
We were attempting to standardize communication, have more timely communication with families. Right now, board policy states that we will communicate with families, anybody 8th grade and lower, within 2 hours of the start. But if you're a high school student, you are not getting, your parent is not receiving communication that you're not in school until that night. And what we found is, just due to the load of work, it would be 6, 7 o'clock at night before a parent found out their child was not at school. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're trying to just standardize our communication with our family as well.
Are there any questions?
Is the thought that this is going to decrease the amount of truancy?
We're hoping to get the communication out for that, yes. We are working much closer with the ROE. That's helping. They're coming in at least twice a week, every month, to reach out to more of our students that are even in-house truant, that are just not attempting to go to class, to see what we can do to further engage them to go to class, or if they've been out for some time on their truancy list when we refer them to truancy. So that's been helpful. But as Ms. Parker had stated, it will help with those numbers. That's what we're hoping for.
And then in terms of like disciplinary action, what exactly is this role gonna play a part in that? I didn't quite follow that part.
Sure. So data entry. So sometimes our teachers will write up referrals, and a lot of that will be more of the restorative side of things. However, it takes about a day to turn around and meet with the teacher. Hey, what happened? How can we help the student? So the data entry might not happen until the end of the day when we actually receive the referral at the end of the day, not throughout. So some of our secretaries are staying a little bit later, so it can help with data entry.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Consensus to bring this back for action?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Subject F, staffing request, annually employed substitute 1.0 FTE increase for ELDC. And this is brought to us by Dietrich, Kyle, Billy, and that's it. Dietrich, Kyle, and Billy. Sorry.
So
Information.
currently, the ELDC has an allocation of 1.0 for an annually employed sub. An annually employed sub is someone who works in the building every day and fills in many different ways. They can cover for both teachers and paraprofessionals or instructional assistants and be flexible in meeting the needs of the building. By them having one, they've struggled with absences and just the variety of behaviors and things that go on with the students. So I'll let you guys check.
Sure. So currently they'll have 11 sections, and our 2-section buildings have 12. So we're looking pretty close to 12. So we felt that the need to fill that second annual employed sub would benefit ELDC. Any questions?
I guess about how many days are uncovered? In other words, so do we have 2 people missing from ELDC on a daily basis?
Every day I go to
Probably, yeah.
It can range from, the other day I had 11 people out. Today I only had 4, so it's still a lot, but, yeah.
Well, then you get pulled into the hospital, like,
Yeah.
often? I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
so that keeps you from,
Right. And the question might come up, why haven't we asked for this before? Well, the DCCA came to me at the beginning of the year and said that, there was a lot of coverage. It was not done safely last year. People were covering more kids than they're supposed to be covering. They had double classes. They were doing all kinds of stuff. And so, I wanted to start with one sub just to kind of get the understanding before I said,
I guess my question was more around, I guess I would assimilate this to a conversation we had with Ben a few weeks ago. I was putting a Band-Aid on something or fixing it, and I think we decided to fix it. I guess I'm curious is this sort of absenteeism, more prevalent recently? Is it something that's been building? And is there an underlying problem that we're ignoring and putting a Band-Aid on versus trying to make sure that we don't have people missing? Because that seems like a lot. ELDC is not a huge place.
well, I have 14 certified adults, but I have 21 assistants. So I have a lot of staff, even though it's a smaller place, I have quite a few staff. So I say, a lot of my absences are my paraprofessionals. I have done that. I have some pretty serious situations going on with some of the employees. So their absences have been, and they've just gotten sick. When you were 3 to 5-year-olds, we're all getting
Oh,
sick. So that,
Understood.
yeah, I'm hoping that gets better now. We're all building up our resistance,
Yeah.
That
But I want to make sure that was presented the right way, because we're here to help you, right? And
Right.
we want to make sure that you're not fighting against something with just adding a body count to try to help. If there's an underlying problem, we'd love to hear about it.
Right,
So,
no, thank you.
absolutely.
Any other questions? Consensus to bring this back for action?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Next is our superintendent update.
Good evening,
Make sure
everyone.
you use
Good
your
evening.
I've been checking everybody else to make sure. Good evening, everyone. I have quite a few things here that I'd like to share with everyone. First and foremost, the Interactive Illinois Report Card has come out, and our summative ratings are posted on our website. Thank you to Rita Elliott for updating our website. And each one of our school leaders has been given a draftable letter, a template that also that Rita has created to support their sending the messages out to our families so that it is clear to our families and all of our community on how well our schools are doing. I'm going to say it is a state for celebration. We have moved our summative ratings up, and I can't tell you specifically, I'm sorry, I should be able to say that, but take a look at the website, and it'll be very clear for you how well we have improved, and will continue to improve. However, there is a caveat. Remember, we are coming from a place from the pandemic, right? So those numbers may look well right now, and that's great, but in order for us to continue to improve, we will need to continue to work heavily on ensuring that our students are moving forward and learning and achieving. So we just want to make sure that that continues on and that we don't rest on our laurels, having moved a rating up one for each one of our schools. But great work to everybody, and thank you for everyone on making that happen. Next up is the Human X survey. Well, let me say this first. This morning, the monthly newsletter that I sent out to our community went out, and I've gotten great feedback on that. There was a request there for anyone who was interested in becoming a part of a committee, and we have a number of parents that are very interested in joining our committees.
Awesome.
So I think that's a great thing. We have at least 3 that we'll be answering to, having them select which committee they're interested in. So I think it's fabulous that our families are beginning to want to be more involved than they have been before. So I'm grateful for that. We also in the newsletter mentioned that the Human X survey is out, and that we're asking for a great return from all of our buildings. I explained how the data will be used to better inform our strategic plan and our school improvement plans, and that we just want to make our district from going from good to great and continue to be greater. I know that sometimes it's really easy for us to say, I'm okay with what's happening, or, this is working the way that I like it, and not complete a survey. But the survey information, the data that we get from that is very important. We really need to hear from everyone. Good, bad, or ugly, we need to know what we need to be able to improve on, or if we're doing something that's really good, then we need to continue to do that. So I'm asking that everyone please complete that survey. The survey is open until the end of this week. Is that right, Jackie? Thank you. And so we want to make sure that everybody does continue to complete those. There is, right now, the completion rate at the elementary, at the schools is anywhere between 17% and 40%. I know we can do way much better than that. So I look forward to seeing a higher completion rate amongst the schools to ensure that we get good return on information that will help us to continue to improve our district. We welcomed Amir back, so thank you for that. I think Cindy got that happening. I wanted to mention also that today we had our principals, our school leaders in the building. We met over at the library, so we're moving around the district having meetings. And we had a great meeting that continued to align not only our strategic plan, the school improvement plans, but also the Illinois school, the report card. In addition to that, our equity continuum. I want to thank thank Amanda Quinette Parker for a great presentation she did, and making sure that we line up that work and that we continue to support our schools in relation to that equity work that we are doing, and show the whole state that DeKalb is really making some great strides in that work. We also finished our unconscious bias book, and the last part of the book was around courageous conversations, courageousness, that really lined up to the work that we did while we were in professional development in Texas around the courageous principles. So our principals, our school leaders continue to see the alignment of that work, and moving forward, I think it just kind of strengthens the leadership at the school buildings. And then, of course, a reminder to everyone that our community conversations are happening. We have one tomorrow evening and the other on the 29th of November. They're going to be held, both meetings are going to be held at the NIU Roberts Nursing Building. This is a building that is being considered for our next school site, and we are garnering, we're looking for feedback from the community about how they feel about it, what kind of program they'd like to see, and any other information they would like to share. It is open to any and everyone who is interested in coming out. The meeting, we invite folks to come at 5 to begin networking. The meeting actually starts at 6, and we'll be doing activities with the children as well so that they can give us feedback. Just say it out loud, Monica.
Free food.
Oh, there's free food. So there's plenty for us to do. We invite everyone out to mix and mingle and get to know the community members and listen to their feedback. And I think, our athletic director, Peter Goff, has an idea, a suggestion, I think, that's backed up by the high school in relation to the commons area here at the high school. As you may recall, we lost a longtime friend of DeKalb, who'd been with the district and who'd been doing marvelous work. I guess affectionately known as Goose. And Peter would like us to consider and to rename the common area after Goose. So a proposal will be coming to us from the high school and from Mr. Goff, our athletic director, around that. So I just wanted to give you all a heads up. I think it's a great idea. I think it really would bring our community together, rally, and show support for the family and all the work that Goose had done on behalf of our students and our families and our communities. And with that, that's it for me. Thank you.
Any questions?
Please fill out surveys, please. It's the only way we have to help make things better. So take it seriously, please do it. We need the feedback in order to get better, so I just wanted to share that thought as well.
I appreciate that. Any other questions or comment? Thank you. Okay. And we have come to an end with that, our meeting. It is recommended that the Board of Education will adjourn. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any nays?